Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes Reacts. Dave. Office
You got it wrong, you got it wrong, you got it wrong.
I did. I didn't know what
you
to do.
You thought about it too long.
I didn't think about it long enough, that was the problem.
Bloke. Office bloke.
Yeah, but even that's not right, is it?
No.
I didn't want to say
Office bloke Daz.
I didn't want to say my last name because I don't want people stalking me on Facebook. It's out there, don't worry. We are two of the Office Blokes. Office Bloke Mike was unfortunately stalked on Facebook and he's disappeared.
Yeah, he's currently at the premiere of 007.
Yeah, he is. It was Office Bloke Mike's last movie as Bond, isn't it?
Body double.
Yeah, arse double I heard. Just arse double, that was it.
Do you know how much he gets paid?
Go on.
£1.50.
£1.50, there you go. Yeah, Office Bloke Mike has got COVID. He's all right, don't worry. He's perfectly healthy. Just
for today.
For today, yeah.
Changes by the day.
It does. It's up and down when you're that age. We are two of the Office Blokes, as you know, two other YouTube channels, Patreon page, social media merch, all that good stuff. Click the link below and it'll take you where you need to go. Yeah. Especially our Patreon page where big changes are coming soon. Big, much needed changes.
Big changes.
Right, how geography gave the US power.
Okay.
This is off the back of us doing Wendover Productions.
Brilliant channel.
China's geography problem, which was so interesting. Yeah. It really was, wasn't it? I'm going to say that because America's one country pretty much. I know it's attached to South America as well and Canada, but it's kind of uninvadable to look at, isn't it?
North America, Mexico.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, you know, geography is not my strong suit, but the point I'm trying to make is it's not... There's no one obvious point where you could do a land invasion of America, in my mind.
Canada and Mexico.
But they're allies. That's the point.
Yeah, right. I see what you mean.
They've not got a hostile ally.
By, right, okay.
Yeah, that wouldn't have to cross an ocean to get to them, and they'd have ample warning. That was the point, a shitty attempt at a point.
An enemy, you mean?
an enemy, yeah, floating about in the sea. I guess it's going to be a lot more than just that, though. So we will get into it. How geography gave the US power. Let's do this.
Video was made possible by Squarespace. Build your professional web presence for 10% off by going to squarespace.com/Wendover. The United States and its entire history can be largely explained by its geography. Since its inception, the fundamental factor influencing and guiding the country's development is that it is far from everything else. The US is bounded to the east and west by ocean and to the north and south by friendly and militarily weak countries. And this has meant that the US has almost never been threatened on the home front. Many suspect that this is why the US has such a defined government and political structure, because it had the time to develop the system while it wasn't worrying about potential invasion. But geography had a much deeper role in the formation of the United States that started back before the states were even united. It all started back in the colonial era. The 13 colonies were essentially split into 3 geographically distinct groups that can explain why the areas look the way they do today. The New England colonies were heavily forested and had some fantastic natural ports like Boston and Newport. However, the area had a short growing season and a rocky landscape, which meant that the crops never grew very well. Therefore, the area ended up as a center for shipbuilding activity and fishing. To get their food, they would trade with the breadbasket of America, the middle colonies. This mid-Atlantic region was fantastic for farming. The area has a long, warm growing season and plentiful, arable soil. It also has navigable rivers stretching far inland that could help transport goods. Philadelphia and New York were the 2 major cities of the colonial era, and their locations reflect their roles. You'll notice that both New York and Philadelphia are at the mouth of significant navigable rivers, while Boston is not. The inland mid-Atlantic farmers transported their goods via these rivers, so the major cities grew as trading posts at the end of these rivers. If New England had been a farming-based economy, its largest city would likely have developed here, at the mouth of the Connecticut River, but even though it was navigable, the river was of little use to the area. Having a major ocean-going port in Boston was what was important for the maritime-based New England economy. Further south were the southern colonies, home to some of the oldest colonial settlements. Now, there's this one line that you can put on a map to explain why southern cities are where they are. It's called the fall line. The technical explanation is that this is where the soft sedimentary rock that forms the coastal plains meets the hard basement rock that forms the land farther inland. The simple explanation is, however, that above this line, rivers will have waterfalls and rapids. Below, they'll be flat and navigable. Baltimore, Richmond, Durham, Raleigh, Columbia, Augusta, and a bunch of smaller cities all sit almost exactly on the fault line. There are two reasons for this. The obvious one is that below these cities the rivers were navigable, so colonists could get to these cities. But what was perhaps more important was that they were far inland, which gave protection. Spain controlled Florida for much of colonial history and had a significant military presence.
I didn't know that. Spain controlled Florida. It makes sense, but
Didn't it mention it on one of the previous videos we watched?
not that I'm aware of. They may have done and I've just missed it. But instead of getting independence, you should have just teamed up with us and we could fight off the Spanish. And then we could, then we could have some of that good American soil as well.
At the time, it was reasonable to think that they would continue their expansion by moving up the coast, so colonial cities in the South chose their locations in part based on natural fortifications. But some of the most significant events in US history happened because of one fact: the South is hot. Very early into colonial history, settlers in the South figured out that the area was fantastic for tobacco cultivation, and England loved tobacco. The only problem was, tobacco is a much more labor-intensive crop than wheat or beans or corn. So the farmers brought in help, just not voluntarily.
Oh shit.
The American South became one of the biggest...
When they were saying, like, England loves tobacco, I was like, yeah, it does. And then it goes straight to slavery, and I'm like, oh, fuck, that's so sketchy. Yeah. I didn't realise.
It's part of history. It's something that we can't change. It's
oh, I know, and it's something to be remembered and learned from.
Correct.
But it's a dark part of history, isn't it?
Destinations of the slave trade, and plantation owners were getting filthy rich. A big reason slavery existed for so long in the US was actually because the South was so physically big. You see, the job of Supreme Court justice used to be part-time. In the 19th century, the justices would only come to DC for a portion of the year, and for the rest of the year, they would travel around an assigned area and hear cases alongside local judges. The problem was, the North was much more densely populated and had better travel infrastructure than the South. The South was vast, sparsely populated, and had very rudimentary road systems. Therefore, judges assigned to the North were given a smaller area with a larger population, while the Southern judges were given a larger area with a smaller population so that they could get around their whole circuit in the same time. Therefore, in the 19th century, when considering the constitutionality of slavery, the South, the slave-owning area, was overrepresented in the Supreme Court. The crucial Dred Scott case in 1857, which cemented the legality of slavery in U.S. territory, was decided by a bench of 5 Southern judges and 4 Northern ones, even though only 8 million of the country's 27 million free inhabitants lived in Southern states. Although some may call it a stretch, you can at least partially attribute the Civil War to the weather in the South that made tobacco and cotton cultivation possible. So how did the US end up becoming the superpower it is today? After the colonial era, the United States had to push out west to gain the strategic advantage of isolation. In 1800, what is now the US was essentially divided into 3 sections ruled by 3 countries: the United States, France, and Spain. In the colonial era, nobody really ventured west of the Appalachians. There was no real reason to, and it was the unknown. In fact, it wasn't until 1789 that the first explorer crossed the continent to the Pacific overland. The first problem preventing expansion was Spain and France's ownership of the Mississippi River region, or more specifically, New Orleans. You see, New Orleans was perhaps the most important city on the continent because it lay where the most important river on the continent met the ocean. The Mississippi River has an absolutely enormous watershed that all drains here. He who controlled New Orleans controlled the entire middle country. There were almost no roads going from east to west in North America in the early 1800s, so to get something from Pittsburgh to New York, it was actually easier to ship by boat on the Ohio and Mississippi rivers to the Atlantic than to make the 300-mile overland trek. Rivers were how people got things around, so without access to New Orleans, the US had no access to the rivers, and without access to the rivers, the US couldn't get crops and other goods from this region to the outside world. Luckily, France agreed to sell New Orleans and the rest of their huge swath of land to the US in 1803 for the equivalent of $250 million 2017 dollars. This proved to be one of the best purchases in history, as the area now has an estimated value of $1.2 trillion. The US then got...
I was wondering why we'd never heard of like another push, you know, to fight the French to take the middle bit. They just bought it. And didn't they do it with Alaska as well?
Not sure.
Wasn't Alaska, didn't it belong to Russia at one point? Or have I just made that up?
Don't know. I'm not sure.
I think it used to be attached by, I suppose, the sea being frozen.
Yeah, I think it told us on one of the previous ones. I definitely knew about the Spanish down this side, down the west coast and into the Gulf, because I remember it from another video we did.
Yeah. It's crazy though. So when was it 1776? Was it when America was founded? So that was just the portion on the
East Coast.
On the East Coast. I thought it was all of it.
The whole thing.
Yeah, I never knew that. It's good videos. This guy makes, isn't it?
Access to the Pacific in 1819 in the Pacific Northwest, then fully in 1848 at the end of the Mexican-American War upon the secession of California and the Southwest from Mexico. The United States now existed from sea to shining sea. It was at this moment when people were convinced, with merit, that the US was untouchable. No real superpower existed in the Western Hemisphere, which meant that nobody could truly threaten the existence of the United States. Any invading army would have to run supply chains across oceans, which greatly reduces power, and at least historically, there was no threat of another superpower arising on the North American continent because of, once again, geography. Mexico was largely a desert and had no solid river system like the US to facilitate ease of movement. Without a solid transport system and ability to easily grow crops, it had little chance of gaining the population and level of development necessary to rival the US. Canada also had its own transportation problems. It didn't have any rivers crossing the country, its climate didn't allow for much farming, and mountainous terrain made roads difficult. Few realize that even today, only one 2-lane road connects the entirety of eastern Canada to the entirety of western Canada. Just last year, a bridge on the Trans-Canada Highway collapsed, and so, for 17 hours, there was no way to drive from east to west, and the country was split in two.
Wow.
If ever Canada was invaded by land, there would be no solid way to facilitate troop movement, and it would likely operate more as regions than a cohesive country. The US is therefore in a privileged position today where thousands of miles separate it from the serious issues of abroad. The North American continent is largely devoid of international conflict, and so the United States' success can be accurately attributed to its geographic isolation. When you don't have to worry about protecting against a potential invasion, you can devote more time to education, development, science, and politics. The United States is a country that worked almost by chance. It just happened that the right mix of people landed in the right place to create a world superpower. So, without the fantastic geography of the continent, the United States almost certainly would not be the superpower it is today. One of the most frequent questions I receive is what tools I use to run.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It really is.
Like you say, great videos he does.
There's a lot I didn't know there as well.
Yeah.
I just assumed, like I say, that when America was founded, it was the whole landmass of North America.
It'd have been a massive fight though, wouldn't it, for when it was founded? Like you say, it makes sense that it was just the East Coast, because it was all, when you think about it, it was all around Boston and New England and Virginia and all around there, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which is all East Coast.
Yeah. I just never really considered too much what was happening on the West Coast at the same time.
Yeah, nothing.
Because I suppose you're going from no one unified government to a government. It couldn't possibly be that whole landmass in one sign of a pen, really, could it?
No.
It's crazy, though.
Interesting. But all them geographical videos that he does, we've done one on China as well, which will be coming out. I don't know if it's out already or...
It'll be out by the time this is out.
Yeah. But there's a few. There's one on Russia, there's one on China.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But that Wendover Productions does great videos. Do like it.
Really, really high quality videos, well researched.
Yeah. Speaks well as well.
Yeah. No, not like us.
Nope. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed it too. Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the bell. We'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.